There are some things you don't forget, no matter how many years pass. The smell of turkey and sage. The way the dining room table looked when my grandmother set it herself. The good china. The folded cloth napkins. The little place cards she wrote by hand every single year. And the sound of my grandfather's cane on the hardwood floor. Slow and deliberate. The way it always was when he had something important to say. I don't remember exactly what I was thinking when he walked into the room that Christmas Eve. I was probably thinking about the pie, or about whether I remembered to plug in my phone before dinner. I was 28 years old, and I thought I knew everything about my family. I thought I had everyone figured out. I was wrong about almost all of it. My grandfather, everyone calls him Pop, is 81 years old. He built his construction company from nothing. Grew up in rural Ohio, came to Columbus with $40 and a trade license, and spent the next 5 decades turning that into something that now has contracts with the city, with developers, with firms whose names you'd recognize. He is not the kind of man who complains. He is not the kind of man who asks for help. So when he walked through my aunt's front door that Christmas Eve and I saw his face, something in my chest went very still. There was a bruise along the left side of his jaw, dark, already yellowing at the edges, which meant it wasn't new. My first thought was that he had fallen. My second thought, when I saw the way he was standing, straight-backed, deliberate, eyes already scanning the room, was that he had not fallen at all. My aunt was the first to say something. She rushed over and touched his arm and said, "Pop, what happened to you?" In that voice she uses when she's performing concern, more than feeling it, he patted her hand and said, "I'm fine, sweetheart," and walked past her toward the living room like he hadn't just walked in looking like he'd been in a fight. I was standing near the kitchen doorway. He caught my eye as he passed and gave me a small nod. Just that, a nod. And something about it made my throat feel tight. My uncle was there. My aunt. They're 2 adult kids who I barely know anymore. My mother was already seated at the table, her posture very straight, her wine glass already half empty. My stepfather was standing near the fireplace with his phone out, pretending to read something. He had been my stepfather for 11 years. I had never once felt like he considered me anything other than a complication in his marriage. The thing you have to understand about my family is that we are very good at pretending. Holidays are performances. Everyone plays their part. My mother plays the gracious daughter-in-law. My stepfather plays the successful son-in-law. My aunt plays the hostess. Pop plays the patriarch. And I play the quiet one in the corner who notices everything and says nothing. That night, I decided I was done playing. Dinner started the way it always does. My aunt had outdone herself with the centerpiece. There was a prayer. There was the passing of dishes, the commentary on the food, the surface level catching up. My stepfather made a joke I didn't laugh at. My mother touched his arm like she always does when she wants him to feel appreciated in public. Pop was quiet. He ate slowly. He answered questions when people asked them. But every so often I'd look up and find him watching my stepfather with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Not anger. Something more deliberate than anger. Like he was cataloging something. It was my cousin who finally said it. He'd had 2 beers, and he leaned across the table toward my grandfather and said, "Seriously though, Pop, you gotta tell us, what happened to your face?" The table went a little quiet. Not completely, but enough. My grandfather set down his fork. He picked up his water glass, took a sip, and then he looked at my stepfather. "Why don't you tell them?" he said, "since you were there." I don't think I breathed for 5 seconds. My stepfather laughed. It was a short sound, almost casual, like he was being accused of something minor. "Pop, come on," he said. "I'm asking you to tell them what happened," my grandfather said, "at my office last Tuesday." My mother's hand moved to her wine glass. She didn't pick it up. She just put her fingers around it. My stepfather's jaw tightened. That was a private conversation. "It stopped being private when you put your hands on me," my grandfather said. The table went completely quiet. I have replayed that moment so many times in my head. The way the candles kept flickering like nothing had happened. The way my aunt's mouth opened and then closed. The way my mother looked at my stepfather. Not with horror, but with something that looked almost like warning. "He did what?" my cousin said. My grandfather didn't look away from my stepfather. He came to my office and told me I needed to change my estate documents. Said I was getting old and I wasn't thinking clearly, and I needed to move a significant portion of my assets into accounts that he and your mother control jointly. He paused. When I told him no, he grabbed me by the collar, and when I told him to get his hands off me, he hit me. Someone made a sound. I think it was my aunt. My stepfather said that is an absolutely insane characterization of what happened. Gerald. My grandfather said his name the way you'd say it to a child. Flat. Final. I have a security camera in my office. I've had one for 12 years. You've been in that office dozens of times. You knew it was there. My stepfather's face changed. It was fast, just a flicker, but I saw it. Everyone saw it. I don't know what you think, Hugh. I've already spoken to my attorney, my grandfather said. On Monday, before any of you arrived. He looked around the table slowly. Not with cruelty, just with the calm of someone who has been holding something for a long time and has finally decided to put it down. I want you all to know that, whatever happens next, I made these decisions with a clear mind. Clearer than I've had in years, actually. My mother's voice was very controlled when she spoke. Pop, I think we should talk about this privately. Tonight has been... I'll talk to you privately tomorrow, he said. Tonight I want Gerald to understand something. He reached into the breast pocket of his jacket. He took out an envelope. It was plain white, legal size. He set it on the table in front of my stepfather. That's a copy of what I filed with my attorney on Monday. You can read it whenever you like. My stepfather looked at the envelope. He didn't pick it up. Gerald. My mother said his name this time. A different kind of flat. He picked up the envelope. He stared at it for a moment, then he slid his finger under the flap and opened it. I watched his eyes move across the page. I watched his face go still. He put it back down. Is this real? He said. It wasn't really a question. It's real, my grandfather said. I didn't know yet what was in it. But I could see, from the way my stepfather sat back in his chair and pressed his hand flat against the table, that whatever it contained had shifted something significant. My mother reached over and picked up the envelope. She read it standing up, which she never does. She reads everything sitting down, composed, deliberate. She read it standing up at the dinner table on Christmas Eve with the rest of us watching, and when she finished, she said very quietly, "You can't do this." "It's already done," my grandfather said. She put the envelope down, my grandfather said. She put the envelope down. She looked at me. I don't know why she looked at me. Maybe because I was the only other person at the table who wasn't performing. Maybe because I was the only one not saying anything. But she looked at me like I was somehow responsible, and in that moment I understood something I had been slow to understand for a very long time. She had known. Not all of it, maybe, but she had known something, and she had chosen him. My stepfather stood up. He said something about needing some air. He walked toward the front door and opened it and went outside into the December cold without his coat. Nobody stopped him. Nobody followed him. My aunt started crying quietly. My uncle put his hand over hers. My cousin looked at the table. The candles kept flickering. My grandfather looked at me. "Walk with me to the kitchen," he said. I don't know what I expected. Maybe I expected him to explain the document. Maybe I expected him to be angry, or to collapse a little now that the performance was over. He didn't do any of those things. He got himself a glass of water from the tap and stood at the kitchen counter, and he said, "How are you doing, sweetheart?" I almost laughed. "I don't know," I said. "Pop, what was in that envelope?" He looked at his glass. "I restructured my estate," he said. "Your mother and Gerald were listed as primary beneficiaries. They aren't anymore." "Who is?" He looked up at me. "You are, and a foundation I've been meaning to set up for a while. But mostly you." I had to put my hand on the counter. Pop. You've been the one, he said. You've always been the one. You came to visit me every month this past year. You called me on Tuesday nights. You sat with me after your grandmother died and you didn't rush to leave. He set his glass down. I know what your mother married. I knew for a long time. I didn't want to believe it because she's my daughter and I love her. But a man who will hit an 81-year-old in his own office to get at his money is not a man. He is not someone I am willing to reward. I didn't know what to say. I stood there in my grandfather's kitchen on Christmas Eve and I felt something enormous moving through me that I couldn't name. Not happiness, not triumph. Something quieter. Something that felt like grief and relief at the same time. You should have called the police, I said, when it happened. I know, he said. My attorney said the same thing. I was embarrassed. He paused. I won't make that mistake again. Gerald will be receiving some additional correspondence in the new year. What kind of correspondence? The legal kind, he said simply, and picked up his glass again. We stood there for a moment in the quiet of the kitchen, the sounds of the other room muffled and far away. Outside, through the window above the sink, I could see the streetlights and the first few flakes of snow beginning to fall. I need to ask you something, I said. Ask. Did you plan this tonight? He thought about that for a moment. I planned to be honest, he said. I planned to put that envelope on the table. Whether or not the evening went the way it did, I couldn't control that. Gerald did what Gerald does. He set down the glass. But yes, I wanted witnesses. I wanted your aunt and your uncle and your cousins to know the truth about who's been managing their expectations where my estate is concerned. I'm old enough to know that silence protects the wrong people. I thought about my mother, about all the years I had spent being confused by her choices, making excuses for her, trying to understand the version of her that had chosen this man over and over again. What's going to happen with her? I asked. I don't know, he said. That's up to her. She has choices to make. He looked at me steadily. So do you. I nodded. Don't be angry at her forever, he said. Be angry for as long as you need to be, but don't make it permanent. She's still your mother, even when she makes terrible choices. I wanted to argue with him. I didn't. We went back out to the table. My stepfather had come back inside at some point and was sitting with his arms crossed, staring at nothing. My aunt had cleared some plates. The conversation had started again. Cautiously, the way conversation does when a family is trying to find its way back to normal even though normal is gone. I sat down. I ate the rest of my dinner. I helped my aunt with the dishes. I said goodbye to my cousins and hugged my uncle. When I hugged my grandfather at the end of the night, he held on for an extra second. Thank you for being here, he said. I'll always be here, I said. I know, he said. That's why. My mother didn't say goodbye to me. She left with my stepfather while I was in the kitchen. I heard the door. I didn't run after her. I drove home that night through the snow, alone in my car, and I thought about the look on my stepfather's face when he read that document. That specific moment when a person realizes that what they thought they had control over has slipped entirely out of their hands. I thought about the security camera footage my grandfather mentioned, about the attorney, about the legal correspondence coming in the new year. I thought about the way my grandfather stood at the head of that table with a bruise on his jaw, and more dignity than every other person in that room combined. I thought about what he said in the kitchen. Silence protects the wrong people. 2 weeks later, my stepfather was formally served with a civil suit for assault and battery. My grandfather's attorney also sent a formal notice to the property management company that handled 2 commercial properties my mother and stepfather had been co-managing as a handshake arrangement with my grandfather for years. That arrangement was terminated. My mother called me on a Wednesday. It was the first time she'd called since Christmas Eve. She started to say something about how things had gotten out of hand, about how she hadn't known Gerald would go to the office that day, about how she was as shocked as anyone. I let her talk. I listened to all of it. Then I said, Mom, I love you, But I saw your face at the table. When Pop said Gerald hit him, you didn't look shocked. You looked scared. Those are two different things. She was quiet for a long time. I'm not disappearing, I said. I'm not cutting you off. But I need you to be honest with me. That's it. I'm not cutting you off. But I need you to be honest with me. That's it. I just need honesty. She said she needed some time. I said I understood. I said I'd be here. I meant it both ways. My grandfather is doing well. The bruise healed. He comes to my apartment for dinner on the second Sunday of every month now, which he started after Christmas and which has become the thing I look forward to most. He sits at my kitchen table and drinks decaf and talks about his company and his plans for the foundation and occasionally about my grandmother, who has been gone for 3 years and whose absence still moves through every conversation like a current underneath water. Last month, he brought me a box of her things, her recipe cards, a few pieces of jewelry. A photograph of the two of them from 1974, young and laughing at something outside the frame. I put the photograph on my bookshelf where I can see it from the couch. Some nights I look at it and think about what it took to build something real. What it takes to protect it, what it costs when the people you trust most decide that what you've built is theirs to take. And I think about my grandfather standing in that dining room on Christmas Eve, bruised and steady, putting a white envelope on a table. Silence protects the wrong people. He taught me that. I'm not going to forget it. I've thought a lot about what makes a person think they can take something that isn't theirs. Not just money, not just property, but the dignity of someone who built everything from nothing with their own hands over the course of a lifetime. I think it starts small. A favor here, an assumption there. The slow, quiet belief that proximity to wealth is the same thing as a claim to it. Gerald didn't wake up one morning and decide to be the kind of man who hits an 81-year-old in his own office. He became that man gradually, over years of getting away with smaller things. That's how it usually works. And my mother, I don't think she's a villain. I've had to sit with that for a while, because it would be easier if she were. It would be easier to just be angry and stay angry. But she's a person who made choices, one at a time, and each choice made the next one easier to justify. She chose him when he was charming. She chose him again when he was difficult. She kept choosing him until choosing him meant looking away from something she couldn't have truly not seen. That's not villainy. That's something sadder than that. And sadder things take longer to forgive. What I keep coming back to is my grandfather standing at that table, bruised. 81 years old, and completely unafraid. He had every reason to handle this quietly, to protect the family's image, to avoid a scene, to let his attorney handle it in private and never say a word at Christmas dinner. He chose not to. He chose witnesses. He chose honesty in a room full of people who had spent years being very comfortable with the performance of it. That took something. Not anger. Anger would have been easier and it would have looked different. What he had was something more like clarity, the kind you arrive at when you've stopped caring more about how things look than about what's actually true. I think about the security camera he mentioned. 12 years. He'd had it for 12 years. He never led with it. He never used it as a threat. He just kept working, kept building, kept trusting. And when the moment came that required it, it was there. That's not luck. That's what it looks like when a person lives with integrity for long enough that their life starts to protect them back. I'm still figuring out what I owe my mother. I don't think the answer is nothing. I don't think the answer is everything either. What I've landed on for now is honesty, which is what I told her on that Wednesday phone call. Just honesty. I'm not asking her to be perfect. I'm not asking her to have made different choices 10 years ago. I'm asking her to stop pretending with me that things are other than what they are. That's the only thing I actually need from her. Pop comes to my apartment on the second Sunday of every month. He drinks decaf and talks about the foundation he's setting up and sometimes about my grandmother, and I make dinner and I listen, and it is the most ordinary thing in the world. It is also, I've realized, exactly what I needed all along. Not the inheritance, not the resolution, just someone who shows up and tells the truth. Silence protects the wrong people. He said that in my aunt's kitchen, and I wrote it down when I got home because I didn't want to forget the exact words. I haven't forgotten. I don't think I will.